It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. I say Paris-based. COVID oblige. We're also going outside of the studios. Fewer people on set. Those are the rules. From Rome, Barbie Latza-Nadeau, correspondent at large for The Daily Beast. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Here in the studio, long time no see, German reporter and long time no see in the flesh, I should say. German reporter and producer Ulrike Koltermann. How are things?
Good to be back. Guten Abend.
Guten Abend to you. Stacey Meshtree is the new Paris bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal. How are you?
I'm glad to be here.
Glad to welcome you. And from Jerusalem, we say a happy Jewish New Year to France 24 correspondent Iris Mockler. I hear you're staying home tonight, Iris.
That's right. It's Happy Jewish New Year in lockdown as Israel becomes only the second country to go into lockdown once more. So yes, here we are at home.
All right, we'll talk more about Israel in a moment. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag World This Week. So the good news is there were 1.2 million COVID tests conducted in France this past week. The bad news, well, you have to wait 7 to 10 days if you want your results. The backlog, enough for the health minister to remind citizens not to swamp labs every time you sneeze.
Doit être fait si vous avez un doute, parce que vous avez des symptômes, ou si vous êtes un cas contact avéré. Cas contact avéré, c'est que vous avez été en contact et normalement appelé par l'assurance maladie, l'ARS ou par le proche qui a été malade.
Let's break this down, Ulrike. The contact cases of your contact cases are not contact cases.
Absolutely. And to start with an anecdote, I had an appointment at 9 a.m. this morning, and I thought I was smart to have the first one. I arrived half an hour earlier. There were like 150 people, and I just went away because you cannot wait. I mean, the queues are so long to get an appointment, to get your test. And then you have to wait for up to 10 days to get the result. So there's no point in waiting so long to have the result, because then you have to follow up all the people you met during 10 days. So actually, right now, the situation in France it's just not functioning, the system.
Why?
I think they were trying to compete. The tests were always a very weak point in the French strategy. In the beginning, there were not enough tests. They even admitted that in February, when Germany was starting to prepare tests, to develop tests, France was laying back. And now that they finally got the tests, they invited like everyone, yes, please come and get tested. And yeah, we are proud to have the same number of tests than in Germany. Yes, we have over 1 million per week. But they can't handle it anymore. They don't get the results in time, so it doesn't make sense anymore.
There've been reports that the president has chastised his health minister because there was a snafu over masks at the beginning. Remember, they said, "Oh, you don't need them," and then they found, well, yes, we do need masks. And now, with what Ulrike describes, the pressure is on to reduce that bottleneck.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're receiving your test results 7 days later, it isn't very efficient, because that in that 7 days you're either quarantining or you're walking around and potentially exposing other people to the virus. That in addition to all of that, there was this thing called contact tracing, which everybody's forgotten about, which is supposed to be sort of the sharp end of the spear to really stop the virus from spreading. When we came out of lockdown, the lack of testing has completely undermined that effort. If you go and look at the average number of people who are contacted as part of the contact tracing effort, for every one infected person, they're only contacting 3 other people. You compare that to a place like Taiwan, where they had a pretty efficient contact tracing system in place. They were contacting an average of 20 people. So, the testing has really slowed down all the other prevention efforts.
But there's also an economic problem, because if you get in touch with all these contact cases and you tell them, please go into quarantine, who is going to pay for it? They never tackled the issue. And every time they make an official statement, they are downgrading, like it was a prime minister, then it's a health minister who is talking, and at the end it's only the préfet, like the regional leaders, announcing bad news. but they're so afraid to take more restrictions that that can be difficult for the economy. So they just don't dare, because the economy is already down. They have 120%. How do you say, debt of the interior product. So the situation is so bad that they just are not able to tackle it.
Return to full lockdown is the political third rail, you might say. The number of hospitalizations in England doubling every 8 days. So we've had announcements come this Friday, tightening of social distancing rules in the northeast of England in several parts, and the potential for more to come. The worst hit country, though, and those are some of the measures that they're putting in England. And again, we heard Boris Johnson this Friday saying right now, no return to full lockdown. The worst hit country is Spain, where they have announced a partial lockdown for the Madrid region for 13% of the population only. That's come in for criticism, where basically it's not a full lockdown. You can still go to and from work. They're saying, why just us? These are the poorest and most densely populated neighborhoods, places like Puente de Vallecas, where the locals object.
O se confina todo Madrid, que también podemos hablar sobre la pertinencia o no, pero confinar barrios selectivos en una ciudad que tiene movilidad, ¿cómo limitas la movilidad entre barrios?
Barbie Nadeau, the idea of how to solve this bottleneck of testing, what to do about the skyrocketing number of cases. It doesn't seem like you're having that problem where you are, which Italy, ironically, was the country the worst hit by COVID in the spring.
That's right. You know, the Italians have really embraced this aggressive testing. If you get off a plane, all you need is your airline ticket to go to a drive-through testing site, and the test is back within 6 hours maximum, and that's a long time to wait. They're all over the city of Rome, all over Milan, all over the larger cities. You can get tested. All the kids going back to school on Monday had to get either the serological antibody test or a swab before they were allowed into school. These sorts of things are making up for lost time in a lot of ways, because Italy really suffered in the beginning. Now they seem to be sort of leading the way at this stage in the game. But mask use is mandatory here in all buildings and all venues, and it's heavily, heavily enforced. And I think that makes a huge difference in the success here too.
But your explanation when you hear Ulrika talking about how chaotic it's been in France when it comes to testing.
Well, I think that the thing that's different about Italy is it was really hit hard first. You know, we were in a total lockdown, the most strict lockdown outside of China in the very beginning. People got really scared. People didn't enjoy it. People lost a lot of money. People lost loved ones. And I think that the health system really responded by, coming up with these procedures that allow testing to be efficient and fast. And because if it's too slow, like you just mentioned, people don't do it. They walk away. Here, you can actually drive up with a plane ticket or even just saying, I feel I need to be tested, and they'll test you. And that's key, key to sort of, the second wave. But Italy today had high numbers, almost 2,000 new cases. That's the highest we've seen since May. Everybody's going to be nervous about that. So testing aside, we're not out of the woods yet here.
And you're saying that Italy has suffered the highest, has suffered a heavy toll also when it comes to its economy. You have published a story in the Daily Beast, Barbie, where you're saying that homeowners seem to be hitting the panic button, where they're either selling their apartments that usually were used for Airbnb or using them for long-term lets?
That's right. We've seen a huge boom in the real estate market. And when you look at the real estate ads, all you see are really Airbnb ads. You see the towels neatly folded and the table set and all these sorts of things for apartments that are for sale. Because about 3 or 4 years ago, Italians bought up apartments, fixed them up, and rented them out. And nobody came this summer. We just didn't see the tourism numbers. The decline was incredible. And people can't afford the mortgages. So they're selling these apartments. Now, there are restrictions in the per square meter prices you can put on an apartment. So they're selling them for pretty cheap. Some of these apartments are very small and really, really nicely done. And that's we're seeing that effect. If the tourists ever come back, if things open up again, perhaps they'll buy their apartments back. But for the meantime, right now, they're selling them as fast as they can.
Selling them as fast as they can. Stacey Mestre, you're a former Rome correspondent. Your reaction? You heard Barbie there saying they have no choice but to sell after just one bad summer?
Well, I mean, there's been stories here in Paris as well about people selling their Paris apartments, moving out to the countryside, deciding that, you know what, we're just going to cut losses. Sometimes it's families that were, you know, planning a move anyway, but they're going to move that calendar forward and cut ties with Paris. It's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, there's been some softness in the Parisian real estate market recently. We've seen prices come down a little bit. Whether or not this becomes a lasting trend, we're going to have to wait and see.
And just one other word about Italy.
Yeah.
Fair play to them. I see that on October the 15th, there's going to be a new movie out, a comedy, and it's called Lockdown Italian Style. They turned that around pretty quick. There's the poster. You can see it. Lockdown all'italiana.
Yeah.
You could guess by the poster kind of what the plot is about. There you see
I think
it.
they're going to sing a lot.
I think it's fascinating to see the differences between Italy and France here, because as to Barbie's point, you know, the Italians seem to have really absorbed and digested the trauma of the first lockdown and maybe even learned some lessons from it. When you look at the footage of those testing centers, we're not seeing testing centers like that here in France. As far as I can tell, the French government has sort of outsourced that issue to private laboratories. So, yeah, you know, it looks like the Italians really used the lockdown in order to prepare for our current moment.
Barbie, I know you're just back from the Venice Film Festival. Were there any early screenings of Lockdown alla Italiana?
No, that was not on the list, but I can't wait to see it. Although I'm not sure the theaters will be open by the time it comes out if the numbers continue to climb.
All right, and then, of course, there's Israel, where it is Jewish New Year this Friday. And as of this afternoon, 2 p.m. local time, well, it's the first nation in our parts to return to full lockdown. It's prompted this noisy demonstration Thursday evening with protesters directing their wrath at the government.
We are a group of physicians and scientists are trying to persuade and call our elected that lockdown is inefficient and is disastrous.
Inefficient and disastrous, Iris Mockler?
Well, that I must say is how the people I've interviewed feel. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of confusion because the restrictions keep changing. When I went to sleep last night, you could leave your house, you could go 500 metres from your house. When I woke up this morning, it was 1 kilometre. I've just heard a government minister say, no, it should be 250 metres. You know, the lockdown's begun and they're still fiddling at the edges. So it's super inefficient. Just in its administration. And I'm just thinking about all the pluses in Italy, that none of that was really carried out here. And I think that's why people are so angry. I heard someone say, you've squandered our sacrifice. You sent us out, the Prime Minister said, go out, have a good time. That was in May. It was meant to be a phased opening. There were meant to be tests. None of that happened. Everything reopened, schools, the economy, everything was just open, bang, just like that. And then the numbers began climbing, and no one has been able to bring it down. I mean, 5,000, more than 5,000 today. That was new infections. There is a stress on the health service, definitely. Some hospitals in the north of Israel actually can't take any more COVID patients. They're sending them down south. So I can see why people are angry. It's also, you know, exposed the fault lines in Israeli society, because people aren't just angry at the politicians, which they are. They're also angry at each other. So secular Israelis are angry at the ultra-Orthodox Jews, where the numbers are very high, the infection rates are high, and they say they're not obeying all the restrictions. The ultra-Orthodox Jews are angry at the secular Jews because they're going out. You know, they say, we are not allowed to go to synagogue, but you are allowed to protest every week. So it's really exposing people are angry at the government and at each other.
You reported a few months back for us, Iris, how when there was the Jewish feast of Purim, the religious communities didn't really respect lockdown. But then when Passover came around, the Jewish Easter, they were all taking it a lot more seriously. What's happened since?
That was during the first lockdown. And in fact, funny you should mention the religious holidays. That's actually a source of contention. The ultra-Orthodox communities are furious. They say, why have you locked us down again during these holidays? If you had to implement a lockdown, couldn't it have been done earlier? This is a very important holiday. It's some Jewish people only go to synagogue on this holiday. You're preventing that. That's what they say to the government that they're part of. So, yes, there is a lot of anger. It's back to that sacrifice being squandered. Not enough has been done. People were very good during Passover. It was very small. And once again tonight, we're seeing people ordinarily, the Jewish New Year is a big celebration. Jewish New Year is a big celebration. There's 3 weeks of holidays and visits and family and friends and overseas, and not much of that is going on. And that's also it's put a bitter taste in people's mouth. And I think, it's with a heavy heart that people are celebrating the New Year today.
All right, and that's going to go on, as you say, for 3 weeks. When we come back, we're going to be taking a look at what's been perhaps a positive for the Israeli Prime Minister this week, certainly a positive for him, and that is the normalization of ties with Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast correspondent at large. Barbie Latza-Nadeau is with us from Rome. German reporter and TV producer Ulrike Kolterman joins us as well. Stacey Miketree, Paris bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal, is here in our studios. And from Jerusalem, France 24 correspondent Iris Mockler, who is telling us about all the criticisms surrounding that lockdown in Israel that's coinciding with the high holidays. Now, it wasn't all bad for Bibi, the prime minister, this week. Tuesday, Benjamin Netanyahu, with 2 strokes of the pen, doubling the number of Arab states that recognize Israel, with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain normalizing ties at the White House, much to the delight of their host.
This is peace in the Middle East without blood all over the sand. I say it. Right now, it's been blood all over the sand for decades and decades and decades. That's all they do is they fight and kill people, and nobody gets anything.
Iris Mockler, what were the reactions where you are?
It depends which side of the line you're standing on. In Israel, I think they were genuinely pleased. It didn't give Benjamin Netanyahu the poll boost I think he was hoping for, because people are really focused on the lockdown and on their lives and on the current difficulties inside Israel. But there's no doubt that if you ask people, how do you feel about this, it's regarded as a victory for Israel and a victory for Netanyahu, which I think it is, because, as one Israeli analyst put it, it's the end of the Israel-Arab wars. It's not the end of the Israel-Palestine conflict, though. And I think if you're standing on the other side of the line, the people that I've interviewed, the Palestinians are bitter. In some senses, I think they're still in shock. They feel abandoned by the Arab League, by the Arab world, and they feel betrayed. A stab in the back is something I heard more than one person say. They don't really understand how they're in this position. And I think that in the circles around Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, there's starting to be an understanding that perhaps it's going to be a new Arab League and a new Arab world, and they may have to change some of their strategies and tactics too. But bitter reactions on one side and actually thrilled on the other side. We spoke to a travel agent who's been organising trips to Dubai, to the Emirates, for Israelis. She's got 3 lots of 25 people waiting to go. They want to be the first there.
All right, and we could talk in this instance about the art of the deal of selling warplanes. The Trump administration talking up the prospect of F-35s going to the Emirates. How's that been received, Iris?
Well, I think it was always part of the deal. We heard from Benjamin Netanyahu that it was not going to be part of the deal, but that was plainly not right. In fact, I'm not even sure why he put his head in that noose, because it's obvious that, he is selling this as peace for peace, not land for peace, as in the version that we had with the Palestinians, but it's plainly also arms for peace. This was part of the deal. It's something that the Emirates, that the UAE has wanted for a long time. It has been opposed by Israel, but now that they're in the tent, now that there is this relationship, then there's no reason for the United States not to consider selling these planes to the UAE, and that's what they're going to do. It still has to go through Congress, but we've heard from the United States President twice now that he's happy to do it, and that they're going to give Israel some edge, sell them more equipment, better for the US economy, but there's going to be an edge for Israel, but it's not going to mean that there won't be a sale of F-35s to the UAE.
Ulrike Kolderman?
Also, watching Trump staging all these ceremony with the Arab states and Israel, it was so clear that he just wanted to position himself as a peacemaker and replay the famous historical handshake between Arafat and Rabin 25 years ago. And he wants to be this historical person, the peace broker. But I think it's more or less a part of his election campaign. And it's not very serious, and it also he wants to make, not to speak about anymore about the peace plan that his son-in-law Kushner was trying to impose in the beginning of the year, and which was rejected immediately by the Palestinians. And now the result is that the Palestinians are totally sidelined, and no one is talking anymore about the Palestinian-Israeli issue, and that will remain a problem.
And while the Trump administration talks of F-35s, the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has announced the purchase of a squadron of 18 Rafale fighter jets from France, with the simultaneous replacement of the older Mirage jets that were also French. It's all happening in the midst of Mediterranean tensions that continue to pit those countries against Turkey. Among those unhappy with that decision, by the way, the French Air Force, who, according to Le Monde, have to now wait with orders pulled to satisfy instead of the Greeks. Stacey Maestri, several questions here. Mm-hmm. Again, selling, warplanes are so expensive. Selling warplanes, and especially to Greece, which is just coming out of the economic doldrums that we all know about.
Well, yeah, and clearly this is, part of Macron's effort to stand in support of the Greek government, especially as they've recently had this sort of confrontation with Turkey. Macron sent the French Navy into the region. That was sort of the first sign of support. And now this sale of the Rafale jets. Keep in mind, there's some of them are new, the latest Rafales, and then others are older generations of the planes. But nevertheless, it's a significant order.
And they say,
I think it's mostly symbolic, because announcing it now means that there will be a long, long time before they're actually paying for it and getting delivered. France was trying to sell Rafales for ages, and it took a long time before they found the first client, and then it takes a long time before they finally deliver the first plane. So I think it was more a symbolic act than anything else.
All right, speaking of Emmanuel Macron, next Monday's the day the French government answers bids for 5G licenses. 5G, the next generation, which is supposed to take to warp speed how fast we do things compared to 3G or 4G. And this over the objections of the newly elected Green Party mayors across this country, who had called for a one-year moratorium to study the environmental impact and also security risks. Nonsense, said the French president, who spoke at a tech conference.
La France va prendre le tournant de la 5G parce que c'est le tournant de l'innovation. et j'entends beaucoup de voix qui s'élèvent pour nous expliquer qu'il faudrait relever la complexité des problèmes contemporains en revenant à la lampe à huile, je ne crois pas au modèle Amish. Et je ne crois pas que le modèle Amish permette de régler les défis de l'écologie contemporaine.
I don't believe in the Amish model. What's your reaction when you watch that from afar, Barbie Latza-Nadeau?
Well, I mean, I think it's all posturing, isn't it? I mean, you want to, I think a lot of these leaders that are dealing with are having on one hand the needs of the public, the other hand, the needs of some of the constituents and things like that. It's posturing. Nobody really knows the effects of 5G. Nobody really knows what this means at this point. So it's I believe, still sort of a chess game of sorts.
Stacey Maestri, what are people saying about this? I mean,
I suppose we should seek comment from the Amish, but yeah, I mean, obviously this is Macron, trying to caricature his opposition. It's a move that Macron makes pretty frequently. We all remember the Cuba without the sun comment when he was in the Hollande administration. And then more recently, he made this comment a couple years back.
Are these blunders or are these on purpose, these comments?
I think they're by design. I mean, in fact, the Amish comment, I'm almost sure he's used it at prior conferences before.
I think he forgets where he's talking. I mean, when he was talking for the public that was right there, which was French tech, it was a perfect joke. But then again, it's on social media. And then again, it happens that he comes over as very arrogant. And it's dangerous for him because these are all these little comments and remarks that define his image. I mean, when he said, yeah, I just need to cross the street and I'm going to get a job, these sentences will remain. And talking bad about Amish or making comparisons with Amish people and the Green Party is very delicate because Greens are getting more important in France, and I think it's stupid to ridicule them in that way.
It's stupid to ridicule them. And then, of course, in that petition that was launched a week ago, which, by the way, didn't just have the Greens, it also had people from the other left-wing parties in France. There's also obviously the issue of whether or not Huawei will be in the mix when those licenses are announced. And that's a tricky one for everyone. Germany has been tight-lipped about whether or not to let Huawei into their 5G network.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a political issue. It's not about health and antennas, but it's about data. It's about Chinese having access to our data. It's also an ideological issue for some leftist people saying if we have more broadband, then there will be more consummation, and it's going in the wrong direction. So at least Macron should be able to invite them for a proper debate. And it's a bad idea just to close the debate before it starts.
All right, when it comes to Chinese technology, it's been a week of surprises. First came confirmation that it wasn't Microsoft, but Larry Ellison's Oracle that was taking over U.S. assets of popular video sharing app TikTok. But there was confusion. Oracle, in confirming it was winning, the winning bidder on Monday, didn't refer to this as a deal. This deal as a sale or an acquisition. Instead, it said it was chosen as, quote, TikTok's trusted technology provider. Now, with just 48 hours notice, the U.S. Commerce Department has ordered app stores from Sunday to remove TikTok and the messaging and payment platform WeChat from their services. Now, it's not an outright complete ban, Barbie Latza-Nadeau. But again, this raises the temperature, and it's a bit like what we were discussing when it came to that signing in the Rose Garden with between Israel, Bahrain, and the UAE. Is this really about U.S. interests, or is it about that election on November the 3rd?
Well, everything's about the election on November the 3rd. But, giving a 48-hour notice so every single person who ever thought about downloading TikTok has plenty of time to do it is not exactly as strong as perhaps just shutting it off immediately. I think it's, a warning shot. And every single thing Trump is doing right now is with an eye on what's going to happen in November and what Joe Biden's doing in response to it. And I don't think you can separate anything he does right now from that.
And it affects the rest of the planet. Iris Makler, what do people in Israel think when they see this superpower rivalry over TikTok?
You know, they are a little aware of the superpower rivalry because there's been a lot of Chinese interest in investing in Israel, and there's been a lot of American opposition to that. So they're a little bit caught in the middle between the two superpowers, and that's quite complicated for Israeli interests, and they're trying to walk that line. So I'd say people here are watching it with great interest. If they can lift their eyes from their own troubles for a moment and look outwards, and perhaps now that they're in lockdown, they'll have more time to do that, to actually ask what does it mean for us, as well as what does it mean for everyone in the United States and every small child in Israel who has TikTok.
Yeah, because there's going to be a lot more screen time over the next 3 weeks in Israel. Rika Kolterman here.
But also TikTok is a political force now. I mean, it was TikTok users who were taking the credit for a very low turnout in an Oklahoma Trump rally. And Trump risks a lot if he makes all of them angry. And I think the young people will find another way of organizing. And again, just shutting it down will not solve any problem.
You know, Stacey Maestri, you speak to French business people here. They say, oh, we don't like Donald Trump. When it comes to China, he's right.
That's true. I mean, I think there has been a sort of wake-up call. In a strange way, they've been looking at Donald Trump and saying, you know what, when it comes to his sort of hard-nosed position on trade, he makes a lot of sense to them. I mean, you know, it's been a complaint in the French business community for years that China is, you know, ripping off our intellectual property. You know, we can't compete with them on manufacturing. So, you know, the French business community is actually looking for some sort of ally in this fight.
And do you see Huawei being granted one of those 5G licenses on Monday?
Here in France,
Huawei is partnering with two of the big telecoms providers.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speculate on that. You know, French officials have been a little bit ambiguous. You know, they're walking a fine line. You know, again, they're stuck between the Trump administration and China. You know, so they don't want to really go out on a limb here. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see.
All right. The French population, I can tell you, is fairly unanimous when it comes to Donald Trump's positions on what's happening in your native California these days. Tragic news. The West Coast continuing to burn, the so-called Bobcat fire that's been raging north of Los Angeles for 2 weeks was still only 9% contained when the day began. These images are from dawn. They're startling. Similar story up the California coast, in Oregon, in Washington State. Stacey, what are people making? It's the second time in 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, the incredible thing is that if you're from California these days, you've almost become desensitized to it. And yet this latest cycle of fires has been so intense and so powerful that people are just throwing up their hands. You know, you can see what the air quality looks like in these images, but having breathed it myself, I mean, it's a miserable conditions to be in.
And yet our reporters went and spoke with people who survived the Paradise Fire. Their houses burned down.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, their houses are getting burned down again. So they're again building in areas where they shouldn't be building houses, or certainly not building them by the same fire code regulations.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
is it the fault of the politicians, or is it the fault of Californians?
I mean, it's a confluence of factors, you know, going from climate change on down to local legislators to, you know, to drought conditions. It's a sort of perfect storm.
But I mean, if a president comes to that area and says literally, it'll start getting cooler, just sit and watch. I mean, what signal does it send? It's just unimaginable.
Yeah, I don't think that local leadership is necessarily looking to the president at this point for answers, though, in terms of how to solve this crisis.
Barbie Latsanado, is this an issue in your native South Dakota?
No, we have other issues in native South Dakota, but you look at this and you look at what, you know, Trump is saying. You know, you need to do forest management and all these sorts of things that the people in California and Oregon and Washington State know very well isn't going to be the answer. It really does become a political issue as well. You've got the governor of California standing in, you know, this wasteland saying this is climate change in action. And then you have the president on the other side of that saying that he's a climate change skeptic. It becomes a very powerful political tool, I think, also in this election year.
You hang on. You say that it's not an issue at all in South Dakota? People, what, they don't care?
South Dakota, my beloved home state, is flyover country. And as much as the people on the coast don't care about flyover country, I think it can be said that the people in flyover country probably don't have an eye on what's going on that much on either coast.
Iris Makler, your thoughts on what we're seeing? And by the way, it's not just in the incidences of extreme weather that are increasing. Here in France, it's been crazily dry since the start of confinement. We've only had like 3 days of proper rain in the Paris area since the month of March. It seems as though extreme weather is increasing at breakneck speed. Your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with that. I'm Australian, as you know, and as I watch these California fires, all I can think of is the fires in Australia, which was only 9 months ago, but of course feels like longer because it ended at the beginning of the COVID crisis, and it's so similar. And there were hundreds of millions of acres, billions of animals lost. The skies were the same colour. You can't look at this and say it's just poor forest management. You have to see a pattern of increasing drought, of the effect of the climate. Just here where I'm standing in Jerusalem, which isn't Australia, but it has been so hot and so dry. It's the hottest September in more than a century. And there hasn't been a day under 30 degrees for weeks now. So you do feel everything's tightening. And it's getting more extreme, and it's happening at a greater speed than the scientists predicted. So I think to stand and say, as Donald Trump does, as many Australian politicians do, no, it's not climate change, there's no science behind that, it's quite shocking to me, and it's quite dangerous for the world.
All right, and
that's my view.
We've seen how it has become, contrary to 4 years ago, a campaign issue in the United States, this issue of global warming. We saw the U.S. president travel to California at the start of the week, speaking to one crowd. And we saw on Tuesday the Democratic vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, return to her home state, the U.S. senator touring the destruction in the company of California Governor Gavin Newsom. Barbie Latza-Nadeau, the Daily Beast, picking up on a lot of people in focusing on, well, Harris's footwear.
That's right. It's really important. When she decided that morning that she was going to do this trip, there are plenty of shoes in her closet, and a lot of people are picking up on the fact that she shows these Timberlands, which are an emblematic shoe of the Black community, of the hip-hop community. We've written at the Daily Beast many, many articles about what this means, what signal this sends. And here's this very strong woman in her 50s just sort of hopping off that helicopter, the plane, or whatever it was, bouncing down those steps, ready to do business. And a lot of people, I think, have inaccurately made a comparison to the First Lady, Melania Trump. We've got to remember that Kamala Harris is not running for First Lady. She's running for Vice President. And so to compare her to whatever Melania Trump might have worn to a refugee camp or a migrant camp on the Mexican coast is terribly wrong, because Kamala Harris, if she is elected Vice President, is actually qualified to be president. And that's what we need to focus on. And her footwear, I thought, was a great choice. And a lot of my colleagues who've written about it, the Daily Beast, really applauded her for that. She made a statement. She put her money where her feet are, I guess, basically.
Should we be focusing on her Timberlands?
If it had been a male politician, do you think anyone had registered what kind of shoe?
Well, you remember George W. Bush's bomber jacket when he.
But come on, I mean, compare the coverage of female clothing and male clothing. It's ridiculous.
Stacey Maestri?
I agree entirely. I mean, women, unfortunately, are held to a completely different standard when it comes to fashion decisions than men are.
And Harris, this was, in a way, her first sort of big coup, wasn't it? And returning to California under these circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, she's going back essentially to, her hometown and the place where she cut her political teeth. So, it's good to see her there on the site. It's
a strange campaign, right? Because we don't see them every day at rallies. the candidates. It was, in a way, it's so strange that it's a rare opportunity to see them out.
I mean, it's important, I think, to see these candidates out there active among the people, so to speak, trying to do something, getting out of the basement. You know, Joe Biden was criticized earlier in the campaign for not leaving his house during the crisis. Now that you actually see them, you know, out and about, you know, driving the discussion, I mean, I think that sends a powerful signal.
I think these visits were very important because at least what happens is that climate change becomes a big issue. I mean, for Obama, it came second after healthcare, but now it's really getting more and more important. And then Joe Biden is committing himself more and more and talking more about it. So that's a positive outcome, at least.
All right, a silver lining there from Ulrika Kolterman, which will be the final word. Many thanks for joining us. I want to thank Stacey Maitre for being with us. I also want to thank Iris Mockler in Jerusalem, Barbie Letza-Nadeau in Rome. We want to thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.